This is Jason Allen's show. This is Jason Allen Scott, Season 1, The Founders Who Changed the World. Season 2, by the way, is going to be about the funders who helped the founders who changed the world today. But today, I'm Jason Allen Scott. I've been building businesses for 35 years. I've sold or been involved in 9 exits. I've started 11 companies and 1 fiasco company. I've run a 7-figure solo business with absolutely no staff, and I've distilled everything I've ever learned, plus decades of studying world-changing founders, into lessons that actually matter for building a new life. It all starts with philosophy, which is why this is really foundationally a philosophy show with a subcategory of business. But before we start with the full of today's philosophy, see what I did there? Before we get into Howard Hughes, let me tell you a little something about our headline sponsor, Pitch Capital. This is honestly something I wish existed 20 years ago, so I was super excited to partner with them and be a part of it. Fundraising is brutal. Everyone that's ever done it knows it. I have raised $1 million in 5 days and $2.1 million through nothing but a podcast. But most people take 6 to 12 months of your life. Decks, intros, follow-ups, rejections, meetings that go nowhere. You actually stop working on your product and service just so you can focus on this one thing, raising money, getting people to believe in the vision that you have, that you and you alone and the product or service that you've created can change the world. And that's where Pitch Capital comes in, www.pitchcapital.com. It's an AI fundraising platform designed to automate all the heavy lifting you hate. All you have to do is upload your business details, and in about 90 seconds, you've got an investor-ready pitch deck and the financial models. And that's not all. Their AI matches you with investors from pre-seed to Series C+. They handle everything. They help handle outreach and even support closing through a secure escrow workflow. If you're raising capital right now, go to pitchcapital.com and save yourselves months and headaches and nightmares. All right, talking about nightmares, let's talk about the nightmare that's been on my mind lately. Today's story is a warning. It's about a man who had everything and ended with nothing, who could have spent his life playing golf, dating gorgeous actresses and collecting dividends, but instead for reasons that I can't work out no matter how many times I have studied this particular story, ended in a descent into paranoia, isolation, and drug addiction. All while his companies kept printing money. Today's source material, by the way, comes from an incredible book called Hughes, The Private Diaries, Memos and Letters, the definitive biography of the first American billionaire, based on over 8,000 pages of his own handwriting. I promised you a raw show where I would try and get this right every single time. And most of the time, I do get it right, but even I get it wrong. I say even as if I'm so great. I have done a lot of these, but that's not an excuse. I'm going to try again. You're right. The guy that's changing my life, the guy that's doing anything, hopefully, Sophia, you'll edit it out. You'll start with right here, right now. Today's story is a warning about a man who had everything and ended with nothing, who could have spent his life playing golf, dating actresses, and collecting dividends, but instead he descended into paranoia, isolation, and drug addiction, all while his companies kept printing money. Today's source material is from a book called Hughes, The Private Diaries, Memos and Letters, the definitive biography of the first American billionaire, based on over 8,000 pages of his own handwritten notes, FBI files, and sealed legal documents. This is the story of Howard Hughes, not the mythology, but the reality. A story of how unlimited resources combined with mental illness and an obsessive need for control doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to a prison of your own making. Because sometimes the most important lesson that any of us can learn is what to avoid at all costs. It's almost the anti-blueprint. What Charlie Munger talks about inversion, like what's the worst thing you can do? How do you destroy your business, right? You don't do sales. You don't do marketing. You don't do PR. You don't get yourself out there. You don't let people know what you do. You don't explain your solution to their problem. You don't find problems that people are willing. Like, think of all the things you could do wrong. Do the opposite. But if there's one person in the history of entrepreneurship whose path you should avoid, it's Howard Hughes. Act 1. The inheritance that changed everything, and the invention that built an empire. Before we can talk about Howard Hughes Jr., we have to understand his father. I'll tell you something interesting that I've learned from doing all these autobiographies and all these biographies and all these interviews with people for the last, 2015 to now, so what's that, 11 years. The more successful the founder, the male founder, the more broken their relationship seems to be with their father. I Don't know if this is true for women, but this seems to be 100% true for men. And it's no different from our hero in today's podcast, Howard Hughes. To understand the man, we need to understand his father. Howard Hughes Sr. was a failure. He was a failure for most of his life. For 8 years, he roamed the Midwest looking for his fortune in zinc and silver mines and on gambling boats full of women and desperate men. It was an erratic existence that found Hughes writing the ebbs and tides of the rich and the lonely and the poor. Pure speculation, constant failure. Then he heard about this thing that was changing the world. He heard about the oil boom in Texas and Louisiana. So he moved there. By the way, proximity to power is power. Try and get as close to the source of anything. It does make a gigantic difference. So he moved. He moves and he moves and he moves and he starts wildcatting. Wildcatting, by the way, is just a fancy word. I looked this up for drilling for oil. So he starts to drill for oil, and big surprise, he fails. And he fails and he fails and he fails. By the start of 1908, Howard Hughes Sr. felt like a failure because he was a failure. He had lost the attention of his wife and rarely saw his son. Striking it rich seemed impossible. Striking it rich seemed like something other people would do. How many of us know that to be true? How many of us spend our lives thinking, if I follow crypto, that'll be the thing, and other people make money on crypto, but we don't. Or if I get into e-com, that'll be the thing. Other people are making money on e-com. That's not the thing. They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again. We entrepreneurs, we business founders, we business builders, we know that's not true. A lot of the time, doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and expecting a different result actually gives us a different result. Howard's no different. He goes from failure to failure to failure without the lack of excitement. It's 1908, he's lost the attention of his wife and he never sees his son, and striking it rich seems ridiculous. It seems the dreams of a young vagabond, a young person who lives off their wits on the streets. And he's 38 years old, which back then is like being 68 now. He is a 38-year-old bragger, is the words used by historians, because he's telling everyone that he's going to do well. He will do well, but he's not doing well. And here's the key insight. Ironically, the key to his fortune will be made and found in his failure. Throughout his years as a wildcatter, Howard Hughes Sr. was repeatedly frustrated by his lack of success in striking oil. The problem, he told everyone, was not the location of the wells, but rather his inability to drill deep enough to tap the oil reserves that he was certain was just there, right there. He was certain that it was discovered beneath the very bedrock that he was drilling upon. No known drill bit could dig through this impenetrable rock that he had found, but he was sure that the oil was, and the gold and everything was just below the rock. The fortune he sought was below the rock he found, and it wasn't him, and it wasn't the location, but it was the tool. Then one day, in a bar called the Oyster Pub in Shreveport, Louisiana, Hughes, by pure luck and luck alone, meets a millwright named Granville Humason, who will change his life forever. Granville Humason had designed a drill bit that resembled two engaging pine cones going against each other. Everyone laughed at the design. Everyone thought it was stupid. But Hughes took it seriously. He paid $150 for two sewing thread spools that basically did this invention. He took the time and he prototyped the fabrication. He mounted it on a rod in a press. He attempted to drill through 6 inches of granite. Legend has it that the drill bit drilled through the granite, drilled through the workbench, and was chewing through the concrete floor below of the workshop before the machinery came to a stop. Hughes patented the invention in August 1909, and here's where genius meets strategy. Hughes refused to sell his bit outright. Instead, he leased the bit on a monthly basis, providing free sharpening and maintenance as the device required. In this manner, each bit paid for itself within a few months, and with each successful month, he was generating nearly completely and all profit. I want you to think about that for a second. In a world that's obsessed with revenue, and from a man that was obsessed with just making money and not being a 38-year-old bragger and beggar, he worked at two things. MRR, monthly recurring revenue, is incredibly powerful. That if he could just get it to the hands of the right people and it did the thing he said it could do for a period longer than 2 to 3 months, he was making money hand over fist. Not just money, but money he could put in his pocket. Money put in his pocket, we call the word profit. Think about that. It's the original SaaS model, software as a service, but it's for drill bits, and it's 1909. He learned something incredibly powerful, something that I tell people all the time. Don't sell the product once. Learn to find a way to sell it again and again and again. In this case, he leased it. He leased it monthly. It generated recurring revenue forever. By the way, this is the same strategy AWS, Amazon Web Services, uses today. Everyone's building digital businesses. They all need cloud infrastructure. Amazon doesn't sell you the servers. They rent them to you monthly. Howard Hughes Sr. did this in 1909 during the oil boom. By the 1940s, Howard's tool, which funny enough, the company was called Hughes Tool Company, was making $40 million per year in profit. Now, let me bring that to today's day. My partner always likes to know, how much does that mean? How much money is that in today's money? $500 million a year in profit. Come on. And Howard Hughes Jr., he owned 100% of it. His dad put every single thing in his name. The spoiled heir. Howard Hughes Jr. never had to work. He never had to struggle like all of us struggle all the time. He never had to earn a damn dime, a penny, a cent, a pence, a coin, luna, a koonie, a krona, a ruble, a euro. He never had to earn a damn thing. His pocket money at 16 years old, $5,000 a month at a time when $5,000 a month represented the annual income for the average family of 4. I want to bring that to today again. In today's terms, imagine giving your 16-year-old $50,000 per month. That's the environment that Howard Hughes Jr. grew up in. Total wealth, zero responsibility. Then, when Howard's only 16, Howard Hughes Jr., his mother dies during a surgery. 2 years later, his father dies of a heart attack at just 54, collapsing in his office mid-meeting. Howard Hughes Jr., who I from now on will just call Hughes, is 18 years old. He's an orphan. Both his parents are dead. And he is heir to 50% at this point of Hughes' total company. 50%. Under Texas law, he's not even considered adult yet, by the way. He's considered an adult at 21, y'all. His uncle is appointed guardian and immediately tries to take control of the company. But Hughes did something smart. He studied Texas inheritance law and discovers a statute that simply says that a 19-year-old resident of the state can be declared by the court an adult in the eyes of the law. This is the power of research, people. This is the power of doing your due diligence. So he files the petition, and he gets the disabilities of youth removed, and he takes full control. If you've listened to episode 1, 2, and 3, you know the power of control is a theme that comes up again and again and again and again, and it's important to notice this and how this shows up in your own life. Howard Hughes Jr., he's offered to buy out his relative shares of Hughes Tool Company, and they accept. Right? They think the company's going to fail anyway because Howard Hughes Sr. is gone and he was the brains of the operation. What does Howard Hughes Jr. know? He grew up on 50 G's a month, never having to work. He grew up in money. He lives in money. He spends money like it comes every month because it does. So they think, let's take our money and run. In 1924, the Hughes Tool The Hughes Tool Company becomes Howard's in totality. In other words, he owns 100% again, just like he did before the board was operated and he came in at 50%. How old is he? 19. He controls a cash-generating machine. He has no supervision, no mentors, no one to tell him no. And he decides what he wants to do with his life. He wrote the words Hughes Tool and then promptly crossed it out. Thinking again, he tapped a small piece of paper, we believe, and he wrote the words, things I want to be. James Clear would love this because he's already connecting his identity to the action which he's going to go through with. This is a powerful lesson. He wrote, number 1, the best golfer in the world. Number 2, the best pilot in the world. Number 3, the most famous producer of moving pictures. If you're paying attention, you might notice that he's missing something. He doesn't write down the words, run my father's business. Because he has zero interest in the thing that has made him wealthy. The pattern emerges. From the beginning, Hughes exhibits behavior that would define his entire life. An obsessive need for control, combined with complete disregard for everyone that isn't him. He convinced a 19-year-old woman named Alla Rice, Alla Rice, to marry him. By the way, I am dyslexic, I am calculexic, so numbers seem backwards, and I'm fully functioning autistic. So good news for you, because the autism allows me to do deep dives into this information, and all information, in fact, in every business and everything that I read. The dyslexia means that I'll probably get words wrong, but I'll get to spell them out and explain them out, which again helps you, the listener. And the numbers thing, well, will mean that I might get numbers wrong occasionally, because what I read and what I say is completely different, same as what I think and what I say when it comes to numbers. So always double check me on the numbers. But everything else, here we go. Okay, so he convinces 19-year-old gorgeous, according to reports, woman named Alla Rice to marry him. She doesn't really want to, but her mother makes her. Arranged marriages based on wealth are incredibly common in Houston at the time. Hughes moves to California to pursue filmmaking. He lets Ella live with him briefly. Then he sends her back to Houston and completely and utterly ignores her. When Hughes neither arrived in Houston nor telephoned, Ella sent telegrams, several dozens of them, each one more desperate than the last, attempting to understand how their honeymoon had dissolved into first separate bedrooms and then completely separate states. But he refuses to accept her phone calls. Eventually they divorce. He just stops talking to her completely. Meanwhile, he is cheating on her constantly in California. And everyone knows. I once had someone say that to me. Like, that's the worst part. It's okay if your partner cheats, but if everyone knows your partner's cheating, that's a whole nother level of cheating. And this is the pattern. Hughes neither seemed to accept the emotions or the opinions of other humans. They just didn't seem to really exist to him. Later in life, Hughes himself admits, I suppose I'm not like other men. Most of them like to, study people. I'm not nearly as interested in people as I should be, I guess. By the way, in this show, I also might put on voices. That's just a warning thing. No idea why. I just think it adds to the interest and excitement of the episode versus hearing me sound the same in every single word and line that comes out of my big fat mouth. So let's continue. People weren't people to Howard Hughes. They were tools, actors in a play where he was center stage. He would dismiss them at his pleasure, at his mercy. This wasn't an occasional behavioral thing, by the way. This was his fundamental operating system. This was Howard Hughes Jr. OS. And it would only get worse from here. In this podcast, or the podcast I will do, I have this idea called the red string theory, right? You know the red string thing is this psychotic board where you put images and a red string that connects them. And I believe every single thing is connected. So in this particular, and I'll try and do as many of these podcasts where I use the red string theory. Sometimes it's pretty easy and obvious to me because of my autism. And sometimes it's not, in which case I ask you, the listener, to try and find the red string in what I'm saying and put it in the comments. I'll put this, by the way, on all podcast platforms, and I'll put it on YouTube so it's easier to make comments that you can read to each other. Anyway, Act 2, the red string. Control is cancer. What we see in Hughes' story reveals a pattern completely different from every other founder I've studied. The competitive advantage of having no competitive advantage. Ford, well, he competes on manufacturing. Edison on invention. You know this from episodes 1 and 2. Disney, an episode to come, on entertainment. In fact, episode 3 is on Disney, I think, or episode 4. And it's entertainment. Walton on simplicity. Jobs on integration. Kroc, McDonald's, on platforms. Rockefeller, an episode to come, on domination. Bogle on cost. Chouinard on quality. By the way, all of these are in episodes just past or episodes to come. But Hughes competes on money and corruption and bribing officials and people in power. And that's not a business model. That's a warning of a failure and a fall to come that is as deep and as disturbing and as painful as one can be. I call this next chapter the Hollywood success. Hughes did have some legitimate successes early in his career. He did bankroll films. His first movie cost $80,000, and he was so bad, he burnt the only prints that ever existed of the film. But, like every single business person knows, you're going to fail at first with your business. First businesses very rarely make success. I think maybe Jeff Bezos is the only example that I can possibly think of where his very first business was a massive success, and then he had failures after that. But most people, our first business is a failure. It normally takes 2 to 3 businesses, I think. I need to look up the data before you really crack it huge. Well, his second film made $75,000 in profit. His third made $614,000 in profit and won the director an Oscar at the very first Academy Awards. But he wasn't thrilled about the money or the art. He was thrilled because it proved everyone wrong. Hughes was crowing, particularly when he thought of his smug Uncle Rupert, who had neither an Oscar to his name nor the $600,000 that Howard Hughes now had in his pocket from something he made, he created, he worked on, he controlled. Ego, not passion, not craft. Just 4 words. I told you so. Like I said, this is a philosophy podcast that just happens to have a subcategory in business. But that's the philosophy that this man has. The ability to say, I told you so, holds more profit than cash ever will. Then he makes a film called Hell's Angels, one of the most expensive films ever made at the time. And it becomes hugely successful. He writes, at 24, he had completely, someone writes, at 24, I didn't make a note of who says this, by the way, but check it out. This is the exact quote that he wrote. At 24, he had completed the most expensive film ever made in Hollywood without any help from a studio. He had orchestrated a premiere event that would never again be equaled in its complexity or effect. Now, someone who knows a lot about premieres and premiere events, because that's what I used to do. I did 10 years in events, top 100 in the world. You can look it up 3 times. In fact, I was top 100. One time, I was top 100 twice in the same year, once as Jason Allan Scott and once as Lord Jason Scott, which is mad how they thought I was 2 people. Maybe because I did so much work. I had a venue called Number 1 Leicester Square, and I had a consultant company, and I did premiere events. I hosted Avatar, Batman 1, Batman 2, Sex and the City, a bunch. Like I could just name lots and lots and lots. And I worked on others. It's hard. It's incredibly hard. And he did it at 24. I think I was 33 at the time. It was, and I had help. He did it completely alone. They said it was the best night of his life. Howard said it was the best night of his life. But here's the pattern. Hughes can't delegate. He doesn't trust anyone. And he has to, like a lot of people you're going to find in these biographies, he has to control everything. Hughes was working at a pace unmatched by even the major studios. At one point in early 1931, he had 4 films in various stages of production and insisted on producing each one himself. Driven by his need to become the most famous producer of moving pictures, he was unwilling to delegate responsibility. Now, we know this from an episode with Walt Disney. I think it's episode 2. Walt Disney is so crazy about control that when he buys his parents a house and they complain about the heating, he gets one of his people from his creative studio, where, by the way, they make cartoons, to go out and fix the furnace. We know, sadly, from history, that they don't fix the furnace, and the house burns down, and his mother dies. But that's how important control is to these people. Hughes would hire directors, then show up on set and tell them how to do their jobs. They would quit, one after the other, after the other. Again, we know this with Disney. Walt would turn up at Disneyland, the first Disneyland, and tell them what kind of feeling he wanted, what kind of scene he wanted to see. He didn't know what tree it was, but he knew that he wanted a forest or a jungle. Finally, one director threw up on his hands and shouted, "If you know so much about this, why don't you just direct this whole damn thing yourself?" And unsurprisingly, Hughes accepts the challenge. This is the defining characteristic of his entire life. He has to control everything, even when it simply makes no sense. The plane crashes. Hughes becomes obsessed with aviation and he sets world records. He flies around the world. He becomes the first most famous person on the planet in the 1930s. But he also crashes. He crashes a lot. He crashes repeatedly. His first crash, making Hell's Angels, this big film. Joined his stunt pilots in the air, Hughes' plane went into a sudden tailspin, shot towards the ground, and when he woke up, he was in a coma with a crushed cheekbone. His wife rushes from Houston to see him, and he berates her for overreacting to this simple, silly situation. She begs him to cut his work schedule, to hire another director. Hughes considered Hell's Angels to be his baby. The idea to suggest abandoning the project was a huge misjudgment on Ella's part. They divorce. The third crash, on Lake Mead, with government officials. The plane hits water wrong, and the propeller slices through the cockpit. Part of the mechanic's head was severed completely off by the propeller blade, and blood poured from the gaping wound and began to flow unabated straight into the lake, is what the reports read. One crew member dies. Another one never recovers. Hughes survives, but with cuts and scrapes. When Hugh returns to Bel Air following the deadly accident, he's a completely changed man. That's what the reports say. He starts burning all of his possessions. His wife tries to save at least one letter from his parents. To no avail. Those letters in particular he made certain were completely burnt. There was nothing left from his past, not even one memory. That's what my notes say. Isn't that something? Now, don't get me wrong. I am 50 years old. I majoritively travel the world. I have a couple of boxes. I have 2 boxes, in fact. I have the entire family album of the Scots, my lineage to the Scots. No one else has got it. Every single thing else I have is gone. And it's strange because when you meet new people and you want to tell them stories, like my grandfather was the first person to get a black belt in judo in South Africa, you want to be able to pull that up and show them. You want to play show and tell. I mean, I still have those photo albums, but if I lose that, I have nothing. There's no videos. There's nothing. That's kind of weird. And he does this on purpose. I've just done this because I've moved from house to house, place to place, all over the world and lost things along the way. He purposely deletes his history. Let's get back to the crashes, although I see that as a crash in his mental health. The 4th crash, testing the XF-11 spy plane. It crashes into a Beverly Hills neighborhood, shearing off the top of a dentist's home, totally takes off the roof. It plows into the garage and it explodes into flames. Flames shoot 100 feet in the air, reports say. Hughes crawls out of the cockpit, A Marine sergeant drags him away from the wreckage. Injuries? A lung punctured in 6 places. Ribs, 8 broken. Shoulder, a broken left shoulder. 3rd-degree burns on the left hand, a severe gash on the left side of his head, and like me, now, a broken nose. The doctors give him morphine. Lots of it. From here on in, he is now kind of, I suppose, very similar to what like Michael Jackson had, maybe even Prince had. He has a group of private doctors, and maybe Elvis Presley. He has a group of private doctors that will just allow him to have copious amounts of drugs. It's not a question of does he need it, it's a question of can he get it, and the answer is yes. Hughes becomes a codeine addict for the next 3 decades. For 30 years, he is an addict to codeine. This next chapter is the corruption. Here's where Hughes' story diverges from any other founder I've ever come across. He didn't build businesses through innovation or customer service or quality. He builds them through corruption. Hughes' most famous quote is that every man has a price. If that wasn't true, men like me wouldn't be able to exist. That's his most famous quote. Every man has a price, and if that wasn't true, men like me wouldn't be able to exist. Throughout his life, Hughes bribes politicians, Democrats and Republicans alike, 2 wings of the same bird. He even bribes FDR's son, giving him tons of money. He sends 3 women to his hotel room every single night. He gives loans to Richard Nixon's brother to start a company. He pays off generals. One general loved filet mignon and lobster tail, so Hughes would have deliveries constantly sent to his home and stuff his fridge full of the finest foods. When the IRS came after Hughes for tax evasion, he created a sham medical foundation to hide his profits. He paid off the vice president. Suddenly, the IRS reversed the decision. When he wanted to stop nuclear testing in Nevada, he said in his own handwriting, he will spend every single bit of his money so he can control the White House. I believe they call this crony capitalism at its worst. And it needs to be called out, because when you see these examples of crony capitalism, then a lot of people point to as just basic capitalism. It gives the rest of us a bad name and could in the future impede our freedom to create the products we want. Think about that. If people think that's all we do as business people is pay off other people to get the things we want because we think cash is the ultimate leverage, it takes down the whole thing. It throws mud on all of us, on everyone. The descent. After the 4th plane crash, Hughes completely falls apart. Only Noah Dietrich felt confident enough to challenge Hughes. More than challenge, he urged him to seek immediate medical help. I think you ought to see a doctor, Dietrich recommended. I made a tally on a pad. You repeated the same sentence 33 times. You've been repeating yourself a great deal lately. Hughes called a doctor. The doctor recognized the symptoms immediately. Nervous breakdown. His advice took the form of an edict. Stop work and take a vacation, or your body will do it without you. I remember someone saying that to me. I burnt out about 2 years ago. And I hired a neuroscientist, an incredible woman, Dr. Rachel Taylor. Shout out, Dr. Rachel Taylor. And she said, when I lost everything in my 3rd divorce, I had to rebuild it and regain it. And I really struggled. But I had a mantra that got me through it, a mantra that saved my life at the time. The mantra was simple. For things to change, I must change. I would say that all the time. If I was going to do something, I would ask myself if this is what I normally do, and this is what I normally get, so I have to change what I normally do, and I'll get a different result. And she said, I'd like to give you a new mantra. Your new mantra is, for things to change, my environment must change. And I was like, what? And she was like, first the body whispers, then the body shouts. And your body is shouting. You need to do something, or your body will do it for you. And I listened, right? I moved to a small town in Portugal called Portimao in the Algarve and lived on the beach for a while. I think you can see pictures and videos on my Instagram. and I learned to skateboard. I chilled out with a bunch of really cool people. But Hughes isn't me. His mind raced with details, plane specifics and specifications, soundtrack scores, movie deals, details. He disappeared, though, for 11 months. No contact with his office, no interaction with any of his companies. And when he came back, he was different. He was paranoid. He was obsessed with germs. He wrote insane memos. It is extremely important to me that nobody ever gets into my room, into my closet, into my cabinet, into my bathroom, into any other area used to store anything that which is or are for me. It is equally important to me that nobody ever opens any door or opens any room, cabinet or closet or anything used to share any of my things, even for 1,000th of an inch or for 1,000th of a second. He was mad. Barking, crazy, lunatic, mad. He spent the last 20 years of his life in a darkened hotel room. In fact, in multiple darkened hotel rooms. He never let the sunlight in. He watched the same movie 120 times in a row. Interesting fact. The last year of my grandfather's life, Dennis Scott, he watched the same film over and over and over. Bloodsport. Easy more than 120 times. He was also a raging alcoholic, fully functional alcoholic because he still carried on his life. Unlike Howard Hughes, he would dress and sit on the same couch and watch the same film. Howard sat completely naked, except for a Kleenex covering his genitals. Shout out to Kleenex for the namesake. His doctor told Noah Dietrich, "I think the time has come for you to have Howard declared incompetent." Spoiler, they didn't. Because they were making too much damn money from him. By the end, Howard Hughes Tool Company was generating $500 million per year in today's dollars, year after year after year, with no one running it. And Hughes Aircraft, that was doing $11 billion in revenue. And Hughes was dying. He was dying alone and addicted, surrounded by yes men who only cared about one thing, their paychecks. He died weighing 80 pounds, covered in bed sores, with a broken, in fact, to read exactly what it says he died with broken hypodermic needles, multiple needles, embedded throughout his body. Act 3, the One Empire. Act 3, the One Person Empire Toolkit. I want this in as many episodes as I can. It's a recipe, if you will, a set of tools that you can take from every episode that you can use on your life that can change your life. That's the whole reason I'm doing this, to change one person's life for the better. Act 3, the One Person Empire's Toolkit, your inner warning system. What can we learn from Howard Hughes? Not what to do. No. In fact, we need to learn what Charlie Munger calls inverse. What do you avoid? What do you avoid at all cost? Well, I think first, money. Not to earn money. We should all earn money. We should make as much money as humanly possible so we realize that money can only solve money problems. No, we have to learn that money without purpose is poison. Hughes had unlimited money. He never had to work. He could have done anything and everything with anyone at any time. But instead, he worked himself into madness. Why? Because he had no purpose beyond control. He didn't want to make great films. He wanted to prove to everyone wrong that he could make great films because they all said he couldn't. He didn't want to build great planes. He wanted to win contracts through corruption. He didn't want to serve customers. He wanted to control every single thing that the customer saw, felt, and heard. You see, money amplifies who you are. If you're purpose-driven, money lets you do more good. If you're control-obsessed, money lets you control more until you're controlling nothing but a prison that you surround yourself in. Now, this is in massive contrast with John Bogle. Bogle would have been a billionaire. Instead, he structures Vanguard so profits went back to customers. His net worth when he died, just 80 to 100 million. Bogart's response, a response I constantly say and remind myself as well as everyone when I say it, I have enough. Hughes had billions, but it was never enough because he never defined what enough meant. So here's my question for you, my question for this episode. If you had unlimited money tomorrow, what would you actually do? If the answer is keep working exactly as I am, you're probably on the right path. If the answer is finally be happy, finally be content, finally feel like I have enough, history says you're in trouble. The second, dos, duo, trois. Is trois? I think trois is three in French. Ni is two in Japanese. Nung song is two in Thai. Twer is two in Afrikaans. Two. Control is cancer. Hughes had to control everything, every decision, every person, every detail. Directors quit, employees burnt out, his wife leaves him. He could not delegate, he could not trust, he could not let go. The result? It was typical Hughes. When it came to intrigue, a complex plan where simplicity would have been better served the purpose. Simple scales, fancy fails. He could have just had a simple life that was still super fancy, but would have given him what it needed for him to be successful, not just the businesses. The businesses were clearly successful. He made everything harder than it needed to be because control for him wasn't about efficiency. It was about fear. If you contrast this, if you put this against someone like Yvonne, I think it's Yvonne Chouinard, I'm doing an episode on Chouinard. Chouinard took 6 months off every year. He told his team not to contact him. He wrote a book called Let's All Go Surfing. There's an episode coming up on that. Why? Why? If he was the only one able to answer questions or make important decisions, then the company wouldn't continue to grow and wouldn't be able to do as much good as possible. See, Chouinard understands if your company can't function without you, it's fragile. If it thrives without you, it's anti-fragile. Hughes built a company that required his constant presence. And then he disappeared for 11 months. The company survived because Noah Deirdrich was actually running everything. So here's my question for you. What happens to your business if you disappear for a month? If the answer is it would collapse, you don't have a business, you have a job. And eventually it will consume you. I have a mantra to which I live by. My mantra for the last 6 years. Never be a boss, never have a boss. I don't tell anyone what to do. No one tells me what to do. I collaborate, I partner, I befriend. I remind myself daily that I am not in ER, I am in PR. My job is to educate you in the hopes that my education will lead to an action that will lead to a different life for you and therefore give me a great life. But I'm not in ER. I'm not saving lives where time is important and expertise and surgery and all those extra things. I just get to tell the stories, share my knowledge, share the knowledge of others in the hopes that it changes your life. That's PR, not ER. Third rule, third thing to take from this. People are not tools. Hughes viewed people as instruments. They had to do what he wanted because they were disposable. They were transactional. That's not right. He marries a woman. Why? He marries a woman he didn't love. Why? And he ignored her when it wasn't convenient. He ignored all the women when it wasn't convenient. He discarded them when they questioned him. He hired brilliant people, and then he fired them the moment they disagreed with him. One of his girlfriends wrote in her diary, once he has become involved with a project or a person, he cannot let them get away from his control. He needs to own something. He has to own it for always. It is the most self-destroying element of his character. I've asked friends and family, and they all say this is actually sociopathic behavior. It was, and it is, and it destroyed him. Contrast this with every great founder that will come or has come in this series already. Walt Disney, who built a studio that treated animators like artists. Sam Walton, who called his employees associates and shared profit with them. John Bogle, who builds Vanguard as a mutual structure owned by its customers. Yvonne Chouinard, that lets employees surf during work hours. They all understand the same thing. Business is about serving people, not using people. So here's my question for you. Another one. Do you view your team, your customers, and your partners as people with their own goals and dignity, or as tools to achieve your vision? And be honest, like no one's judging you, no one's reading this. Keep a book and answer these questions in this book, and no one has to read this book except you. Be honest. Because if it's the last thing I said, if you are using people for your own goals, your own philosophies on what you think you are and what you think they are or believe them to be, you'll end up like Hughes, alone, paranoid, surrounded by people who secretly hate you, who use you too. The fourth thing to learn, mental health is just not optional. Hughes clearly suffered from a mental illness, obsessive compulsive disorder, many say, and possibly schizophrenia. Definitely trauma from those multiple plane crashes. He refused help. He refused diagnosis. He surrounded himself with doctors who were essentially drug dealers, like Elvis. The result? 30 years of decline, 30 years of paranoia, 30 years of isolation, 30 years of addiction, and eventually death. And here's what's tragic. He could have gotten help. He had unlimited resources. He could have afforded the best psychiatrists, as opposed to psychotics, in the world. But admitting he needed help would have meant admitting he wasn't in control, and control was the only thing he had left. This is a warning to all of us. Success means nothing if you lose your mind in the process. If you're working 48 hours straight without sleeping or eating like Hughes did, you're not dedicated. You're sick. If you're repeating yourself 33 times in a minute, like Hughes did, you're not focused. You're breaking down. If you're isolating yourself from everyone who cares about you, like Hughes did, you're not protecting yourself. You're destroying yourself. When was the last time you took a real break? When was the last time you asked someone you trust, am I okay? If you can't answer those questions, stop listening and go do it now. This episode's challenge is to write down the 3 things you're trying to control that you shouldn't be. Maybe it's a project. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's an outcome. Ask yourself, am I controlling this because it makes things better, or because I'm afraid of what happens if I let go? And do the hardest thing. Let go. Delegate. Trust someone else. I have this thing called the deal theory. Delegate, eliminate, automate, liberate. Delegate to someone you trust. Automate the parts that you can. Eliminate as much as you can. Automate as much as you can. And then liberate yourself from it. Allow it to continue without you, because you've put everything that needs to be put in to be replicated. Hughes' entire life can be summarized in one simple sentence. He had to control everything, even when it made no sense. The last words from the nurse who looked after Walt Disney as he was dying is, "I've never seen a man so fearful." He was so scared of death. Listen to that episode, you'll realize that it was because he was about to do something he couldn't control. Don't be Disney. Don't be Hughes. Howard Hughes died in 1976. Alone, surrounded by handlers who barely knew him. He weighed 80 pounds. He was 6'3". The autopsy found broken hypodermic needles in his arms, his legs, his groin. 30 years of codeine addiction. He hadn't been in sunlight in decades, hadn't cut his hair in years, hadn't had a real conversation with another human being in God knows how long. He was worth over $2 billion at the time, which is equivalent to $10 billion today. And he died completely alone. And here's what haunts me the most. He didn't have to live this way. He inherited a company that printed money. $500 million per year in today's dollars. He never had to work. He could have funded medical research, built schools, and lived on a beach. Instead, he destroyed himself chasing control. Every founder I've studied has taught a different lesson. Ford teaches us integration democratizes. Edison teaches us autonomy enables invention. Disney teaches us control can protect vision. Walton teaches us simplicity scales and fancy fails. Jobs teaches us integration creates magic. Ray Kroc teaches us platform beats product. And Rockefeller teaches us domination beats competition. Schonard teaches us quality beats growth. Bogle teaches us serving customers beats serving yourself. Howard Hughes teaches us the most important lesson maybe of all of them. Success means nothing if you lose yourself in the process. You can have all the money in the world. You can control every variable. You can refuse to delegate, refuse to trust, refuse to let anyone else make decisions. But control isn't freedom. Control is a prison. Howard Hughes built his own prison, brick by brick, decision by decision, person by person. And by the time he realized it, he couldn't escape. Howard Hughes Sr. once said, "Every man has his price." Hughes spent his whole life proving that to be true. Bribing politicians, buying people, using money as a weapon. Here's the truth his father should have taught him. The most important things in life can't be bought. And the moment you try to control them, you lose them. You can't buy mental health. You can't control love. You can't bribe your way to meaning something in the world. Hughes tried. For 70 years, Hughes tried. And he ended up with nothing. What are you trying to control that you shouldn't be? What are you sacrificing in the name of success? What kind of person are you becoming in the pursuit of your goals? Because if it's not making you better, it's not serving you. Building a company that matters doesn't mean building a company that controls everything. It means building a company that frees you and everyone around you to become who they're meant to be. Hughes had every advantage in the world, and he wasted it on control. Don't be Hughes. In the next episode, we'll explore another founder who took yet another path. Someone who understood that the greatest business ever built are not built on control, but on trust. Until then, let go of something you've been gripping too tightly. And remember, the only thing worth controlling is yourself. I've been Jason Allan Scott. This is the Jason Allan Scott Show. So we're born. I see you.